right, welcome to the Young Turks. I'm your host, Cenk. We got a lively and exciting show for you guys, as always, on this fine Monday morning. International news, local news, huge protests in London, big shift in momentum in Libya, and then, unfortunately, the news that's going to top all of them, although no one else will be covering it, is news about our banking sector and how that will actually overwhelm every other piece of news in a couple of years. Okay, so that doomsday scenario a little later in the program. But first, we start with international news. In London, we had major, gargantuan protests, the largest since the protests over the Iraq War. I have seen 250,000 people as a number. I've seen 400,000. I've seen 500,000. Huge, enormous protests in London. People from all over the UK streaming in to take part in the anti-cut marches, okay? Now, why are they marching? What is being cut? First of all, 50,000 jobs have already been cut. There's a threat of 170,000 council job losses coming. Also, 50,000 elsewhere in the public sector. £20 billion being cut, possibly from the NHS. When you look at the overall numbers, you've got 80 billion pounds, that's $130 billion of public spending cuts proposed by Prime Minister David Cameron. You've got 500,000 public sector jobs likely lost by the end of all of this, including, here's some other cuts, $28.5 billion axed from welfare payments, and the pension age raised to 66 by 2010. So that is a lot of cuts, and that is a lot of jobs lost. And that is why people are mad. You've got teachers, you've got different public sector workers, but you've also got students, and you've also got people who are sympathetic to this pouring in from all over the UK to take part in those protests over the weekend. And it's an interesting example of how to fight back. Look, we got a little bit of that here in Wisconsin, in the United States. We probably need to get a hell of a lot more from it and learn from it. And look, here's the thing. They're offering an alternative. You know, it's like those U.S. uncut protests that went into the banks with the signs that said, "We found the money." Okay, the money is in the banks, and a lot of these people are pointing out, hey, you know what? We bailed out the banks, not just in the United States, but also in the UK, to the tune of billions of dollars. And at least in the UK, there's actually been slight tax increases, okay? Of course, in the US, we're in a much worse situation. We've got all those cuts coming, but instead of tax increases so that it's shared sacrifice, we've had tax cuts. The top 2% had their taxes cut again by hundreds of billions of dollars. And then they turn around and go, oh, we had to cut education. We had to cut the teachers. We had to cut the unions. We had to cut the middle class. Man, our protests in the U.S. should be much larger than the ones in the UK. But people are beginning to wake up. You saw that in Wisconsin, and you're seeing it in Ohio and Michigan and some of the other Midwestern states. But we got a lot of catching up to do to the UK, and it was refreshing to see the strength of those protests in the United Kingdom. And we'll see if they wind up having an effect on the government. We'll see if they can wind up preventing some of those cuts, or maybe at some point overturning the government and saying this is not the right path. The right path is for actual shared sacrifice. We're going to make some cuts. We also need those bankers and some of the richest people in the country to chip in as well, and also corporations. And by the way, here in the U.S., the amount that the corporations have been paying in taxes as percentage of the rest of us has been incredibly shrunk. It used to be just a couple of decades ago that 30% of the taxes raised in the country came from corporations, corporate taxes. Now that number is down to 6%. Gee, I wonder how that happened. Here's how it happened. They wound up taking a lot of the money, giving it in campaign donations to politicians, and the politicians changed the law, until, whoa, you look at that. It turns out corporations are paying less, and guess who's paying more? You. That money's got to come from somewhere. We need revenue to run the government, right? You got to have the police, you got to have the firemen. I think you got to have the teachers, although now that's becoming less and less certain as they keep teachers. And where does the money come from if it doesn't come from corporations? It comes from you. And that's what people, among the reasons that people are protesting all over the world, and the ones in the UK are, as you see, immense and a great development. All right, so that's the United Kingdom. That's the Uncut movement, and that's fantastic. Now, in other international news, look, I've been arguing that going into Libya in the way that we did through a no-fly zone was the right thing to do. Some progressives hate that, and they say, oh, no, we can never do intervention. Well, that doesn't make any sense. As Obama famously said, although, you can question his commitment to this phrasing, but before the campaign, and the reason he got to be the anti-Iraq war candidate in the Democratic primaries is because he said, I'm not against all wars, I'm just against dumb wars. And Iraq was certainly qualify as a dumb war, but I don't think the intervention in Libya would qualify. I think that's a war that might make sense. Now, people say, oh, well, you don't know the outcome. I know you don't know the outcome. Well, welcome to the real world, okay? Now, that doesn't mean we should go in unprepared, but as I've laid out over and over, I would say, hey, listen, the outcome we're looking for is, one, stop the massacres that Gaddafi was doing and on his way to doing a hell of a lot more. We've already accomplished that part of the mission. And then number two, give the rebels a fighting chance, a fair chance to overthrow Gaddafi. And guess what's happened since? Number one, not only did we stop the massacres, but number two, we bombed his tanks and we bombed his air force, and now he's in a world of trouble. Over the weekend, momentum has swung wildly in favor of rebel forces. So as he was rolling through Misrata with tanks, those tanks got trapped in the cities. They go outside the cities, they get bombed. Inside the cities, they're surrounded by the rebels. And as we had suspected, hey, at some point you run out of fuel, you run out of ammunition. In fact, the whole country, at least the areas being held by Gaddafi, is running out of fuel. And there's huge lines in front of gas stations in Tripoli. Now you have to understand, 80% of the oil-producing areas is now held in rebel territory. So that's a huge problem for Gaddafi. He's also going to have a problem paying his mercenaries, as we've been telling you. Al Jazeera is reporting that one of the incentives he's giving the mercenaries is that in areas you can rape the women. Now, can you imagine anything worse? Can you imagine anything more against your own people, more anti-Arab, if you will? And that is among the reasons why the entire Arab population is against Gaddafi. I'm not saying just inside Libya, where he has some support, but the overwhelming majority are against him. But the whole Arab League is against him, including the new democracies of Egypt and Tunisia, because this is the kind of things that Gaddafi does. He brings in mercenaries and pays them in form of rape to some degree. Now, that's Al Jazeera reporting that, okay? So as far as the advances of the armies is concerned, well, that's where we have the best news. Rebel forces have now not only regained 80% of the territory in Libya, not only are they not getting killed and have beaten back the mercenaries in their previously held cities like Ajdabia and Misrata, but they are now advancing again towards Tripoli. And now there are reports of, hey, where is Gaddafi? Is he in his compound? Is he not? There's some reports that he is, in fact, in the compound. But once you start asking the question, where is Gaddafi? That means people are looking for him to run. So he's in a world of trouble. Now, I'm not saying he's going to be gone in a week, but he could be. I'm not saying that, hey, you know what? We're definitely going to get rid of Gaddafi in a certain period of time. But I'm saying, hey, we got those rebels a fighting chance, and that's what we wanted to do. Now, there's another new line of attack against intervention, which is, some of the people inside Libya who are part of the rebels like Al-Qaeda. Okay, really? In the Middle East, there are some people in a Middle Eastern country that like Al-Qaeda, to which I say, of course! The question is, are they controlling or are they not controlling? If they're a small minority, well, okay, there's a small minority of people here who like the KKK. Doesn't mean that we should not have freedom in the U.S. Look, it's a rough analogy. I understand that. But the question is, are they being controlled by Al-Qaeda? And that answer seems to be overwhelmingly no. Because if you're worried about anybody in the country supporting Al-Qaeda, then you couldn't support the protests in Egypt. You couldn't support the protests anywhere. Tunisia, anywhere. Look, there's a small percentage of people supporting Al-Qaeda in Germany, in the United States. Well, there's nothing you could do about that. The question is, as I said, do they control? And it appears the answer to that is definitively no. Doesn't mean that if you have a democracy in Libya at one point that they're going to agree with everything the United States says. That's absurd. Of course they're not going to. And at some points, I'm sure will be very upset with the decisions made by the Libyan government. But at least they have, a fighting chance at democracy if we get rid of Gaddafi. Doesn't mean it's going to be the world's greatest democracy. It doesn't even mean it's going to be a democracy. But at least there's a chance. We know the devil we got with Gaddafi, and I got no interest in that devil. Here we at least have a chance to have a government that works and that represents its people. And it looks like, that at least there is momentum to that side. And that's why I feel, at least at this moment, partly vindicated in my, decision for whatever it's worth to say, hey, you know what, a no-fly zone does make sense. Ground troops didn't make sense in this case, and no intervention didn't make sense either. And by the way, if it means anything at all, Juan Cole has joined that side. Juan Cole, as we've told you over and over, one of the top experts in the Middle East in the country. He's a professor at Michigan, wrote a brilliant analysis saying, hey, listen, at some points, intervention makes sense. Our assumption is for peace. Our assumption is against war. Doesn't mean that assumption cannot be overcome. And he laid out case by case, point by point, why in this case it was overcome, it should have been overcome. And then since he's written that piece, and I made clear that position over a week ago, it turns out we have been more vindicated than anything else, as the action on the ground seems to be going in the right direction. Now we'll see how it plays out. But I'm very encouraged today. So let's see how it goes. All right. By the way, just on a personal note, if it turns out they get rid of Gaddafi and we have a relatively decent solution in Libya, I will be. Let's see. How would you characterize this? Well, at least 3 for 3. I was in favor of the Persian Gulf War. That war was fairly effective. And now I know some liberals' heads are exploding now, but it's total. In my opinion, it's totally true. And I think in the opinion of a great number of people in the country and probably around the world, it's true. I was against the Iraq war. That turned out to be a disaster, 2 for 2. I was for the intervention in Libya. If that turns out right, 3 for 3. Now, Afghanistan's a little trickier. I was for going in the first place, and we did rout al-Qaeda there. Although we should have done a much better job if we concentrated on it. But now I'm for getting out of Afghanistan because it's been 10 years. Al-Qaeda's been gone for 10 years, and we're wasting our time there. And I think that's also largely right. So you score that any way you like. All right, so now, speaking of dictators, let's talk about dictators here at home. Governor Walker in Wisconsin says, hey, you know what? I don't like what the courts decided, because the courts put a temporary injunction, basically, on his law that takes away bargaining rights from unions, because they said that it was not passed in the right way. You needed 24 hours notice. They only gave 2 hours notice. That's a violation of the law. They haven't even ruled against it yet. They said, let's just, for the moment being, block the law from going into effect. It would go into effect if it was published, basically in the Wisconsin State Journal. Let's not publish it yet because we need to study whether it was passed legally. Makes sense. Now, here's what Governor Walker has done instead. Who gives a damn what the judges say? I ruled the state. I never gave a damn what the Democrats thought, what the minority thought. And now polls showing the majority don't agree. I don't care about any of that. And I don't care about the rules for quorum. I violated those. I don't care about the rules for notice. I violated those. Now, court rules against me? Who gives a damn? He has told the Reference Bureau to publish it on the legislature's website, which he says is good enough, and it goes into effect, violating at least the third law, in which that it says clearly that it actually has to be published by the Wisconsin State Journal, and that is by the Secretary of State, and that is the only way that it could actually become legal in Wisconsin. Walker goes like this to the law and goes, yeah, I'm moving past it. I consider it published, and it is now in effect. The courts are going, what? You can't do that. We issued a ruling. He apparently doesn't give a damn about not just our democracy, but our whole form of government, and the 3 branches, and that the judiciary gets to decide the final ruling on laws. Not in Wisconsin, they don't. Governor Walker, rough talking him and running him off saying he doesn't give a damn what the judiciary says. If that's the kind of democracy you like in Wisconsin, well, Walker's your guy. But if it's not, tick-tock, tick-tock, clock is running out on his 1 year in office when he can be recalled. If you recall Walker, you send a whole message to the whole country and maybe even the whole world. That would be enormous to recall Walker, and he's begging you to do it. He's saying, I don't give a damn what the law is or what any of you in Wisconsin think. I want to do what I want no matter what. Because he fancies himself a tough guy. He's like a little kid who thinks, oh my God, Ronald Reagan was so tough. If I could just be tough like him and crush the unions, it'll be awesome. I'm not making that up. That's in the calls that he had to the fake Koch brother, explaining how he put up a picture of Ronald Reagan during one of the Republican meetings and said how he broke the unions and how he wants to be just like him, just like his daddy figure. All right, recall his ass. That would be phenomenal. All right, now, speaking of Walker. Whew. I got other state stories for you guys, including a great one from Vermont in the next segment. But let's stay in the Midwest for now, because this one is a doozy related to Walker. So we have a gentleman by the name of Carlos Lam. He is a deputy prosecutor for Johnson County in Indiana. Apparently during the protests in Wisconsin, he sent an email to Governor Scott Walker of Wisconsin. How do we know? Because the Associated Press had a request for those emails, and they went through the process, and they won, and they have gotten Governor Walker's emails, and they run into this. It was in a folder called Pro, meaning like people in government, professionals, etc., had sent these batch of emails. So they look through, they find Carlos Lam's email, and it's an interesting one. He says to the governor, if you could employ an associate who pretends to be sympathetic to the union's cause to physically attack you, or even use a firearm against you, you could discredit the unions. Currently, the media is painting the union protests as a democratic uprising and failing to mention the role of the DNC and umbrella union organizations in the protest. Employing a false flag operation would assist in undercutting any support that the media may be creating in favor of the unions. God bless Carlos F. Lam. I love the God bless at the end. He's like, doing a false flag operation, meaning pretending to be part of the opposition and they do something bad towards you, right? God bless. Oh, by the way, they should physically attack you. God bless. And maybe even shoot you. God bless. Okay. Now, Governor Walker apparently, wisely, rarely, in that case, ignored this suggestion and didn't have anyone shoot him. Thank God for him and for everyone else involved, right? And remember when the fake Koch brother called Governor Walker and said, hey, maybe we should get fake thugs just like this to cause trouble. Remember, Governor Walker said, we considered that. But he did say we rejected that idea because it would cause trouble and that he thought it wouldn't help him politically. Okay? Now, but whether he considered it, didn't consider it, look, he didn't do it. So as far as Governor Walker's concerned, he didn't do any of this stuff, so I think you can't put it on him. But you definitely put it on Carlos Lam, who is a deputy prosecutor in Indiana for suggesting this. Now, he, of course, totally denied this in the beginning and said, me? Suggest this? Oh, no. Somebody must have hacked into my account. Of course, Carlos. He said, quote, I am flabbergasted and would never advocate for something like this and would like everyone to be sure that that is just not me. Okay. He went on to say, I think he's trying to do what he has to do to get his budget balanced, referring to Walker, but geez, that's taking it a little bit too extreme when talking about the email, considering the false flag operation, the shooting, etc. When they asked him, when reporters specifically asked him, hey, how about the fake violence that was suggested in the email? He responded again, geez. Now that's too Jesus, right? I'm surprised he didn't throw in a golly gee willikers. So he's appears to be definitely against that. He can't believe his identity has been stolen, his email was hacked, and this double false flag operation was conducted on him, until, of course, he later confessed and admitted, yeah, geez, I sent the email. And he is now resigned. Oopsie doopsie. All right. Come on, man. Look at what's going through their head. This is how they think. And you know, the whole time you were hearing from Fox News Channel and conservative commentators, oh, the union thugs, the union thugs. And meanwhile, actually, Republican thugs are thinking of how can we portray them as union thugs while we actually commit the violence. Now, you remember another Indiana prosecutor, and you got to be questioning the prosecution team in Indiana, has already stepped down, another Republican, because earlier on in this whole process, he suggested that the Wisconsin police should fire into the crowds with live ammunition. To which I say, geez, what the hell is going on in Indiana? So now they have both resigned, admitting, yes, they both said those crazy, outrageous comments. And it gives you an interesting, look into the conservative mind and how they think. All right, now let's take a quick break and come back.
Welcome back to the Young Turks. Anna Kasparian and Cenk Uygur with you. We have a great hour ahead for you guys, including a story on Governor Tom Corbett from Pennsylvania. He is planning on cutting education, especially for public schools, and he's doing so in a very unequal way. So we have that story and more for you guys coming up. But first, I just want to note one of my biggest pet peeves in the media right now, okay? If I see another story on tiny little details on the royal wedding, I'm going to lose my freaking mind. Like this morning, CNN did like a 10-minute story on the type of cake they're going to serve at the royal wedding. Who cares? Like, I get it, okay? I live in a glass house. Some of the stories I do are pointless. People don't like it. I get it, okay? But really, we're talking about cake for 10 minutes straight about the royal wedding? I can't take it anymore. I don't understand why people are so obsessed with it. General Electric made a refrigerator that has this life-size image of Prince William and his fiancée. Who's going to buy that? What's wrong with you people?
Well, it turns out a lot of people are going to buy that because they actually had a contest of what picture to put on the refrigerator, and that picture won.
Oh, such a disaster. I don't get it. There's a picture of the refrigerator. I would never in a million years put that in my house. Even if it was given to me for free. It's scary. It creeps me out. It creeps me out. Look, I can understand people who are fascinated by the wedding, they're interested by the event in general, but like you keep hearing these stories about very, very intricate details, okay? Like, I don't know, the color of her panties on the wedding day, or...
Oh, really?
No.
Wait a minute.
Okay, I'm exaggerating. I guess a lot of people would be interested in that. But you get what I'm saying?
Listen, you know what that reminded me of? It reminded me of Will Ferrell in Old School. When he thought he was in the safety tree, and he's like, I wonder what color her panties are. I think he was referring to the waitress. Are they white, or are they polka dot multicolored? Whatever it was. And his wife's looking at him like... So I'm positive that there are many men in Britain who... are wondering what color panties Kate Middleton is wearing.
I get it. Actually, it's funny because in my effort in making this wedding-related stories uninteresting, I found the most interesting story that they could possibly do. But you get what I'm saying. Like, I don't care what kind of cake they're going to have. I don't care, what kind of car they're going to drive to the wedding. All of these little details, it's just, I don't understand it. Like, maybe a conversation about the venue, that's interesting. Maybe a conversation about the massive audience that's going to be there just to see the wedding, that's interesting. But little things like the type of cake or, I don't know, the type of food, the type of silverware, the type of hairpiece she's going to have on, I don't care.
Right.
So
Anna, let me match your indifference and raise it.
Okay.
I'm going to go over the top in two different ways. Look, I understand if women are interested in where are they having it. Is it going to be like a storybook wedding? What are they wearing? What's her dress? Like the kind of stuff they care about Oscars. It's inconceivable that a straight male should ever care about. So, but I get that some women care about it, right? Mm-hmm. So, point number one. No straight man in the world should care about this wedding at all. Mm-hmm. At all. 1%, one scintilla. Okay? Who cares? It's somebody else's pain in the ass wedding. Okay? Point number two. The British royals are the single most irrelevant people in the history of the world.
Oh my God.
At this point. Okay? At some point, the British royals were incredibly relevant. Maybe they were the most relevant people in the world. Now, There's some long past irrelevancy that is just hanging around. Some anachronistic nonsense. Oh, he's the Prince of England. And when will he declare a war? What is he doing? How is he going to affect the empire? He's not going to do anything. He's just an expensive dude put out there so that people can look at him on a refrigerator. They're irrelevant. Stop talking about them. No one else in the world should care. First of all, the British shouldn't care, but I know it's part of their culture and they're obsessed. They're like, oh, do tell, what are the royals doing? Okay, fine, whatever. You live in that crazy world. For the rest of us, ignore them. They're useless.
Look, Jake, I get what you're saying, but the royal family is cultural, it is symbolic, and I can understand their fascination with them. I think Americans are a little worse because who do we idolize? We idolize celebrities, okay? We pay attention to the Lindsay Lohans and Kim Kardashians of the world. So I guess if you really do a comparison, maybe all of this news coverage on that is a little more interesting than news coverage on, the Lindsay Lohans and the stuff that I do.
I will not bend. I will not bend on this issue. At least Kim Kardashian has nice tits, okay? There's a reason why people care. They go, oh, wow, she's super hot. Look at that. Oh, she's who's she fucking? Get out of town. See, that's kind of an interesting thing, okay? But whereas the royals are like, oh, dude, tell what are they having for tea? Come on, man. There's no reason to care about that. It's crazy.
All right. Let's move on to some stories for today. I'm going to start off with a very serious story, actually. So Governor Tom Corbett of Pennsylvania is planning on cutting education significantly in his budget. In fact, when it comes to public colleges and universities, he's cutting all funding in half. But when it comes to public schools, grade schools throughout the state, the cuts in funding are a lot different, okay? It's very unequal. So some school districts are experiencing higher cuts than others. Okay, just to give you an example, one of the school districts that have the highest cuts is Clairton City, which is experiencing a $1,480 cut per student. At the same time, Quaker Valley is only experiencing a $121 cut per student. So that doesn't make any sense. Why is that? Another really interesting thing is when you really break down the numbers and you delve into the numbers, you find out that the poorest school districts are experiencing the largest cuts. So as I said, Clairton City, $1,480 per student cut. It turns out that 80% of the students in that school district are living in poverty. When it comes to Quaker Valley, where they're only getting a $121 cut per student, only 14% of their students are living in poverty, which is a little questionable. Why is that happening? Another really interesting fact is that the state's largest charter school is in the Delaware County, and they're only experiencing a very, very small cut, $100 per student. It turns out that Governor Tom Corbett's, one of Governor Tom Corbett's largest contributors, campaign contributors, runs the charter schools in the state. Okay, so of course, the district that has the largest charter school is experiencing the least amount of cuts. Another really interesting thing. Yeah. I mean, why are we even surprised? Why are we even having this conversation? This is the most unsurprising thing on the planet. But Vahan Guregian, he is the operator of the state's largest charter schools, actually donated $250,000 to Tom Corbett during his campaign.
Really?
Yeah.
All these are incredibly surprising. The campaign donor's the one getting all the money and everybody else is getting cut, and the poorest are getting the cut the most. And then we got a Republican governor. Golly gee willikers. That is so surprising.
Yeah, I mean, what is there to say about it? Like, they've won. The people with money have won. It's over. It's done. What's going to happen, Cenk? We're going to do this story, okay? We're going to complain about it. We're going to make a YouTube video about it. And then after that, it stops, okay? Do you know how hard it was? First of all, there's no article, I did research on this, there's no article that states the numbers the way that we did right now. There's no news article that says, hey, look at this, okay? One of Tom Corbett's top contributors was this guy, okay, who runs the charter schools. So isn't it a little questionable that the charter schools are getting the least amount of cuts? Why are the poor schools getting the most in cuts? You know, you have to look at several different sources to put it together. So even in print, you don't find a really hard-hitting news article on this. Okay, you don't see anyone in the media talking about it. So what's going to happen? Absolutely nothing.
Well, look, Corbett is crazy in 18 different ways. I mean, he's got this crazy theory, for example, that if you don't give incentives for companies, in other words, give them public money to come drill for gas in Pennsylvania, that they'll go elsewhere. But the gas is in Pennsylvania. They can't go anywhere else to get the gas in Pennsylvania but Pennsylvania. The guy will find 800 different reasons to help his donors and to help the rich and hurt the poor. At some point, we are hoping and believing in democracy that people will see this and go, well, look, that's not what we thought we were getting. It's happening in Wisconsin to some degree, certainly happening in Ohio where K6 numbers are plummeting, happening in Michigan in regards to Snyder. I think it'll happen with Corbett in Pennsylvania. Look, when you take a look at those 4 governors, if we could just recall 2 of them, that would send a huge message and it might affect things. And I think we can recall them, I do believe. And in this case with the charter schools, look, overall, generally speaking on charter schools, it turns out they don't perform any better than public schools. In fact, they often perform much worse. And when you get into this specific case, you begin to see why. When they asked that donor of Corbett's about their information on how they run the charter schools and where the money goes to, they refuse to give it out. Whereas, of course, if it's a nonprofit charter school or a public school, obviously you see all of that information. Since this is a for-profit charter school, they say, no, I don't have to give it to you. Now, why don't they want to give that to you? Because, look, there was the idea behind the charter schools, and especially private schools, was that, hey, listen, if you provide competition, the free market will show you which schools are the best. But in this case, it's not really a free market. All they have to do is buy a politician, have him direct the public funds to them, and then they don't have any incentive to actually help the students. They have the incentive to suck as much money as possible out of that public system and put it into their private pockets. That's why they don't want to show you the books.
Right. The major downfall of charter schools is the fact that they don't need to be transparent. They don't need to disclose where the funding goes. So, back in 2009, Vahan Guregian freaked out because a publication called The Inquirer wrote this great article about where the money is going, okay, how much the administrators are getting paid, how much the teachers are getting paid, how much of that money goes to students. And he was like, no, this information is supposed to be private. People are not supposed to know about it. We got to do whatever we can to hide this information. Okay, and that's the number one downfall of charter schools. Okay, if public funds are going to those charter schools, they need to be transparent about it and show where that money is going. But, this is just another example of poor kids, getting screwed in our education system. Okay, these school districts desperately need this money. They desperately need state funding because keep in mind that schools in poor areas, they get state funding and they also get funded by property taxes, right? If you're a school in a poor area, you are at a disadvantage because you don't get much funding from property tax. So you depend on that state funding. So they're getting completely cut in funding when it comes to property taxes, and on top of that, the state is cutting their funding.
Yeah, look, it just shows total indifference to what I think should be the central tenet of the country, which is a fair chance. I mean, it's the land of opportunity. That's the American dream everybody believes in, that we all have a fair chance. But if the kids in the poorer areas don't get anywhere near the quality of education the kids in the richer areas get, well, then they don't have a fair chance because education is the great equalizer. If you cut that and it turns out you cut the poor kids' funding even more, well, I mean, you're killing the American dream. But Republicans, which are no longer conservatives but simply corporatists, they don't give a damn. They get it. The way the system works is they get reelected. If they take a boatload of money from whichever corporate interest cares about their reelection because they want to manipulate the law, then they run all these ads pretending to be something they aren't, and they win. Look, if we don't put an end to it, it's going to keep happening over and over again.
All right. The Daily Beast wrote this really great article about hedge fund manager Jeffrey Epstein. And if you guys could remember, a couple years ago, he served prison time for soliciting underage sex with 13 to 17-year-olds. He would have these mansion parties. These underage girls would show up, and they would be, under the impression that they were just going to give him a massage. He would have them strip, and then he would basically have sex with them. So he served a little bit of prison time. In fact, he only served 13 months in prison, and it was the most lenient prison on the planet. He was able to leave 16 hours a day to go work. Okay, so, no, this is an amazing story, okay? And a lot of you probably already know about this, but the reason why this story is reemerging now is because the Daily Beast wrote about it after one of the U.S. attorneys who oversaw the case, his name is R. Alexander Acosta, he released a letter talking about how effective the defense was, okay, and how the defense used intimidation on the victims and the prosecutors to basically influence the outcome of the case. Okay, so Acosta writes that the defense counsel investigated individual prosecutors and their families, okay, seeking to unearth personal issues that might lead to disqualification of members of Acosta's team. Defense also often failed to negotiate in good faith. So basically, they were looking for personal details on the prosecution's on members of the prosecution, so they can basically release this information and intimidate them so they back off, right? And keep in mind, he only served 13 months in prison when in the state of Florida, where he was found guilty, if you are a first-time offender, you have to serve a minimum of 5 years, a maximum of 15 years. And there were over 40 women or 40 girls who came forward and said that he had sexually not assaulted them, but had sex with them when they were underage.
Look, here's why this story is amazing and really important. Because it goes to show you, again, the perversion of our system. That if you're rich, you can get away with anything. You can buy justice. You can buy anything, right? And you can even buy the media. I remember when we first covered these stories, the media stories said that it was just one girl in the beginning, right? And that he had asked for ID or something, but she didn't have the ID, and that he's a poor guy, and then a massage turned into something else, and it seemed like he was getting railroaded, right? Now we find out there were over 40 girls, including one he called something like a Balkan sex slave, and that he would share the girls who were ranging in age anywhere as low as 12 to 17-year-olds with his friends at parties, and that he would be doing many different things. Those are the allegations that are coming forward in civil lawsuits. Now, the thing is, you can say, hey, on the one hand, those lawsuits have not been proven against him yet. On the other hand, well, he's got so much money, and he's got the new dream team, legal dream team. He's got Dershowitz on it, Roy Black, another incredibly famous lawyer, etc., doing all this intimidation so you don't find out. It's come to find out, it's the original media portrayal of it wasn't right either. That there is all of these women. And then, look, if you're an average guy and you did even, 10% of what he did, you'd be facing at least 15 years, because they wouldn't just get you on one charge, they'd get you on multiple charges. But his team of lawyers is constantly negotiating with the prosecutors, first the state and then federal prosecutors, to lower it and lower it and lower it. And that 13 months is a joke, because I thought it was a real 13 months when we first covered this story. It turns out he's getting 16 hours out of jail. So he's going and reporting to jail just to go to sleep. And otherwise, he's living in his mansion, quote unquote, working. How preposterous. That's how the rich buy justice in this country. And it's revolting.
Another thing that's revolting is the fact that, he's living in his Upper East Side mansion right now, and he is within 1,000 feet of a school. And for some reason, that's completely acceptable for him, but other sex offenders, oh, absolutely not. If they're a registered sex offender, they have to ask for permission before they go to a family party where there are underage people there.
Yeah, right, but they're not billionaires.
Right.
And that's the difference. Look, there was an article in the New York Times over the weekend. Let me just quickly summarize it for you, because it goes to the same theme, even though it's on a different topic. You know how Countrywide was one of the biggest scam artist companies that did all those fraudulent mortgages, and Angelo Mazzillo, their CEO, which I've talked to you about before, had the internal emails saying this stuff is garbage, it's toxic mortgages, I can't believe we're selling it. He got over $500 million. Then they gave him a comical civil fine, no prosecution whatsoever, never even came close to a jail cell, and got to keep over 90% of his money, okay? So he's sitting up there with nearly $500 million from the crimes he's committed. Meanwhile, there's this guy who's a marathon runner who's featured in a movie. Some IRS agent gets a hard-on for him after watching a movie and says, oh, I don't see, where is he getting the money to train for all this? He launches an investigation of him, originally thinking that he's going to be a tax cheat. Turns out he's not a tax cheat at all, okay? And then they get into his mortgages, and he's stated on his mortgages that he makes $15,000 a month. His income for that year was $180,000, which is $15,000 a month. Totally right. Doesn't matter. They bring the case against him anyway because he, at some point, couldn't pay his mortgages. And they got and this is scary stuff, man. They got somebody to pretend to hit on him wearing a wire to try to get a confession out of him about how he was speculating in real estate, which he was. But sometimes you speculate in real estate and you lose, and he did. He lost. He lost all the money that he had invested in the houses. That's not criminal. They trick the jury. They bring him up for a case anyway. And the jury says, no, he didn't lie on his mortgage. So that should be the end of the case. But they convict him on mortgage fraud anyway because he didn't pay his bills. But that's not the crime. They totally misled the jury. And you know what's happened? He's going to prison for 21 months. Angelo Mazzillo went to prison for nothing. All the people who did the fraudulent loans that they claim the fraudulent loans that he signed, they get away scot-free. He goes to prison for 21 months. That's the upside-down system we live in this country. If you got money, you can get away with anything. If you don't have money, you're going to prison no matter what.